Today we're continuing our conversation about the king of comics, Jack Kirby, as Pop Goes the Culture celebrates Kirby enthusiasm. Today my guest is Arlen Schumer, artist and illustrator, an outspoken expert on American pop culture and author of The Silver Age of Comic Book Art. Hey, it's David Levin, and today we are talking about Pop Goes the Culture, Kirby enthusiasm, and my guest is Arlen Schumer, an artist in the comic book style and a comic book historian. Today we're here to talk about the centennial of the great Jack Kirby. So, Arlen, welcome aboard.
Thanks. Great to be here, David.
So, let's talk a little bit about Kirby. There have been a lot of comic book artists, and certainly we probably both have our favorites. For some reason, Kirby gets a little bit more. He's a little bit higher on the list. Why do you think...
A little? A little?
Why do you think Kirby gets...
Well, let's start right there. A little? Why do you think they call him Jack King Kirby?
Well, let's talk about... That's what we're here to talk about today.
Absolutely.
So why do you think...
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Not at all. This is a conversation.
Yeah.
Tell me what you think. Why?
What do I think about what?
Why is Kirby the king?
Oh, man. Where do you begin? It's like opening up the Bible, you know? Why is Kirby the king? Kirby's the king by dint of his career work, which is both prolific and profound at the same time. He is not only just a guy who penciled or drew, because he penciled and drew beautifully, unique. He had a style nobody else had. But it's what he drew. It's the stories he told with those drawings that were both reflective of his inner world and his outer world that he experienced, like any great artist. And he's one of the greatest artists of the 20th century because he basically created the model of the modern superhero, which created basically most of American pop culture right now.
Right, that's true.
The movies, the TV shows, the characters, the Marvel Universe specifically, all come from the mind and the imagination of Jack Kirby. And coupled with his incredibly unique drawing style, which is truly inimitable. Like any of the great artists in history, there's only and ever will be one Jack Kirby with that style. Nobody else can draw those square fingers and the blocky knees, right?
They've tried.
You know, Joe Kubert, one of the legends, also had a totally unique style. So in terms of the criteria for what makes somebody a genius in their field, you know, there's a TV show right now, Genius, about Albert Einstein. Mm-hmm. I've always felt genius gets passed around a little too much these days. Too many people are geniuses.
Oh, please. Yeah. I can't claim to be a genius, so please, I appreciate it, though.
Don't quit your day job and become a comedian. Is that your material?
That's all I got.
No, but my point is, if you're king or genius, you know, basically what is a genius? What makes a genius? Anybody in their field that not only, like you said in your introduction when I interrupted you and I said a little, when you get somebody that's not just a little above their field, but is in a sense, a pantheon all of their own. The Jack Kirby universe hovers above the comic book field, above all others. Like the Michelangelo of comic book art. Jack Kirby is there in his own universe that hovers above, like one of his great, you know, Eternals spaceships, you know, that double-page spread from Eternals #1. You know that image I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. I wish it just flashed behind me like my green screen would. You know what I mean, David? But
show and tell.
I hope I've answered the question. Is that why Jack is king?
Well, you know, he's more than just a penciler. He was a storyteller. He was a creator in a whole different way. I mean, think about how many thousands of characters did this man create, either single-handedly or with others?
Yes. Well...
Don't go.
You know what that gets into.
No, but the point is...
Do I hear a can of worms opening?
No, let's keep that can closed for now. Let's pay tribute to Kirby, and other things can be elsewhere.
Exactly, as I like to say.
What's your favorite? Do you have a favorite?
Favorite Kirby, what? Character, story,
Story.
work?
Do you have a story that sort of how about this? When you
Got to
first
be specific when talking about Kirby because we're talking about an immense body of work.
Okay, what was the first thing you remember looking at, whether you're aware that it was Kirby or not?
You know, I never really liked Kirby's work when I was a kid growing up in the 60s during the Silver Age. Until Chick Stone starts inking him around 1964, which is also, I'm about 6 years old in 64. My first comic book experience was in 1963 in summer camp. I saw that Superman 1963 annual with a statue by Kurt Swan. I was turned on to DC before Marvel. But I think I remember seeing Kirby when he was being inked by Chick Stone the following summer, also in summer camp, because in those days, summer camps were littered with comic books. I mean, that's where many of us, between barbershops and summer camp, that was our library, right?
Right.
Growing up in that era. So I remember seeing Kirby, and my older brother, a year and a half older than me, Steve, he was into comics also. We both were at the same time, but he gravitated immediately towards the Marvel style. As we grew up a little together in those early years, 64, 65, 66, the Batman TV show, I become the DC fan, and he becomes the Marvel fan, although he also liked the Julius Schwartz superhero stuff at DC. But he was totally into Kirby from the get-go. The Marvels were a little too busy looking to my young eyes. There was what I call a banal simplicity about the DC work. But in terms, getting back to Chick Stone, and why did I know Chick Stone's name immediately? Because God bless, Stan Lee, Marvel, they gave credit to the artist. Superman, we didn't even know Kurt Swan's name until years later. So, I recognized that the art I liked about Kirby was this guy Chick Stone with that bold magic marker line, that contour. And some people don't like Chick Stone. This gets into the whole conversation about, we could do a whole podcast on who inked Jack Kirby the best, which obviously that's part of the Jack Kirby discussion because he was a penciler primarily. So the interpretation of his work by various inkers is a debate. I run a Jack Kirby group on Facebook. We're still having this debate. Vince Colletta, Joe Sinnott, Mike Royer, the usual suspects. But Chick Stone was when I first started to like Kirby's work. But I didn't really get into Kirby until I really got older. Same thing with Joe Kubert. When I was a kid, there was something... Like I said, the Marvels looked a little busy, but my brother was into it. So I got into Kirby, too, in my kind of later adolescent years. Right as he left Marvel, those late 60s years, that's when my brother and I were both most into Kirby.
We're about the same age, so I think I'm right there with you, right around the time he came to DC.
Right. And that was, of course, both, talk about bittersweet, my brother, who was a Kirby devotee, Kirby leaving Marvel in 1970 was the comic book equivalent of the Beatles breaking up in the same year. 1970, the end of the 60s. For comics, it was Kirby leaving Marvel. It broke my brother's comic book heart because he tried to give the DC Fourth World stuff a chance. He hated Vince Colletta's inking. This gets back to the ink discussion. Over at Marvel, we used to talk about if only Joe Sinnott could have inked Thor. So we didn't like Vince Colletta back then when we were kids. But the debate over Colletta versus Sinnott is still going on. But basically, Colletta, everybody loves Mike Royer when he inked Kirby at DC. People forget he doesn't start inking Kirby at DC till almost a year after Kirby appeared. That first year, unfortunately, some of Kirby's greatest works were inked or butchered or massacred by Vince Colletta. And my brother hated Colletta at Marvel. So number one, didn't like right off the bat. Number two, he did not like Kirby's writing. And this is another debate that we're still getting into about Kirby's dialogue and captions at both DC and the rest of his career. And I, for one, again, these are all separate. It's like, because he is a king or a genius, there are so many separate halls of discussion
Right.
about these facets. But my brother couldn't read the Fourth World books. He didn't like them. And it broke his heart. He loved Thor, FF, Captain America. Those were his 3 favorite titles, all by Kirby.
Right.
So my brother dropped comics in 1971 and never returned. Never returned to comics. And isn't it ironic? One of Kirby's famous quotes is, it's more about the career of comics. He said, comics will break your heart, which gets into another hall of discussion about Kirby's broken heart vis-a-vis He Who Shall Not Be Named, and the whole discussion of who created those characters and those stories that are now a multi-billion-dollar part of our American pop culture.
The interesting thing about Kirby, when he came over to DC, and when I started sort of going back and looking at the old stuff, looking at the Marvel's Greatest Comics reprints and stuff, but I remember opening that first issue of Jimmy Olsen because I was a huge Superman fan, and I was starting to outgrow it. And I
hated Jimmy Olsen. I never bought or read an issue of Jimmy Olsen.
I read everything. Superman, Lois Lane, World's Finest, Superboy.
You're Weisinger's favorite fan.
But I was growing out of it. And then I opened up this issue, and I saw the first page. And first of all, the first Jimmy Olsen 133.
Oh, right. Sorry.
First of all, the first page was not a title page. Usually on the DC, they would have the cover and then a title page that would tell you what the story is about. But here was Jimmy Olsen standing there. And I'm like,
let me interrupt for 1 second. Were you aware of Kirby and Marvel?
I was aware of Marvel, and I was aware of the FF because I had read issues, but I hadn't started reading the credits of these things. In other words, I knew his work.
Did you like Kirby's work at Marvel?
I didn't identify it as Kirby's work. I wasn't reading Marvels on a regular basis. I read a couple of issues here and there. I read, the stuff that you saw in the cartoon. So the Diablo story and the Galactus story. I'd seen little bits and pieces of them, but I didn't identify the artist. I hadn't thought about the artist.
The art didn't jump out at you or appeal to you?
I thought the early Fantastic Four, and remember I was a kid, looked... Yeah, well, but it looked more primitive, although that's not the word I would have used. It looked more primitive than the DC.
Where were you seeing the early Fantastic Fours?
Barbershops. Or friends of mine, my friends' houses.
Actual issues or the reprints in those annuals?
Both.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, the early Kirby is crude. I don't like early Kirby.
But
the Dick Ayers ink stuff looked raw and ugly to me.
I had one early issue of Strange Tales that my cousin had given to me with a Human Torch story that Kirby had illustrated, and it was like, ew,
horrible. By Dick Ayers. Ugh, I hate all that stuff.
Okay, so more to the point, I opened up the second page, and there's a double page spread, which I had never seen in a comic book before. And I was like, boom!
Okay, but what about Neil... Wait. This is 1970, late 70, 71. You didn't see at DC what Neil Adams was doing with Deadman with his double page spreads and stuff?
It wasn't Superman. I was 10 years old. It wasn't I saw Adams and Deadman.
Wait. I was born in 58.
So
when were you born?
Same thing. Same thing. You had an older brother.
Yeah, but I was reading the DCs. I was reading Adams' Deadman in 68, 69,
You probably had it better in allowance than I did.
Oh, listen to you. Yeah, what were you, in a ghetto?
A little bit.
Yeah.
The barbershop, I would look at that stuff, and I saw it. I was aware.
Listen, it's great that Kirby's double page spread was the first double page spread you saw. You started out with the best.
At the top. And
Kubert, Kubert at DC, just to let you know.
Yeah.
Kubert at DC, before Kirby got there, with his enemy ace and Sergeant Rock stories in 68 and 69, was doing those double page spreads after the title page.
But that's what started getting me to go back and look at the other stuff. And that's what started getting me looking at the different artists like Kane and Kubert and paying attention. Oh, that's why this Superman artist is better than that Superman artist.
Kirby was your gateway drug.
He was. He was.
Nice.
He was the one who turned me from a kid reading comics into a comic book fan.
Wow, that's a great quote. That's a great quote.
And that's when it happened.
Remember that. You should put that as a sign. That's a great quote. Seriously.
And that's what it was. That's what it was.
Transcribe that and send it to me. I'll buy it from you.
Okay, so the gateway. So what do you think? Everybody has their favorite story or their favorite character or the favorite thing that punched them in the gut for the first time. What punched you in the gut from Kirby?
Okay, that's interesting you say that because it really made me stop and think, wow, what was the first thing that really got me about Kirby? Again, it comes back to that Chick Stone inking. 1964, when Kirby brings back Captain America as the backup to Tales of Suspense, backing up Iron Man. I remember seeing those first couple of stories, and they were like primers on action, fighting, superhero. They were pure Kirby, like almost in a gym, working out his players in just a slam bang action. What Kirby is known for, those first 2 or 3 Captain America stories and Tales of Suspense, I even remember the numbers, I think 59, 60, 61. They're inked by Chick Stone, and they're all slam bang action, movement, everything Kirby loved about Captain America. He said Kirby said Captain America was his favorite character to draw because he loved drawing action and movement and all of those pure things. When we think of Kirby action, those first 2 or 3 Captain America stories is Captain America fighting 3 different gangs of Kirby thugs, as only Kirby can draw them, wearing those jumpsuits with the wrinkles. And it was just, in a sense, Kirby working out Captain America and showing you what can be done with his, mature. He was coming into his own as the great Jack Kirby we know, starting in 64. Coincidentally, with Chick Stone inking him, that's when Kirby's art takes that leap in development. He starts doing collages in 64. His bodies, the bulkiness that we associate with the superhero dynamic, that exaggerated anatomy, that starts appearing in 64. And Chick Stone inking him with those bold contour lines emphasizes that action, and never more so than on those first 2 or 3 Kirby Captain America stories. They were like nothing, when Superman by Kurt Swan got into a fight scene, it was a very medium shot, innocent punch almost. You didn't feel the punch. When Carmine Infantino...
The Marquis of Queensberry rules.
Right. It was all very, like
fisticuffs.
I said, very fisticuffs, and you hardly felt it. You picked up you picked up a Kirby Captain America story, those first 2 or 3 stories,
Street Brawl,
and it was like, holy shit, Batman! Look at what can be done in the comic. We weren't articulating this, but we were feeling it and seeing it. And that is when I think Kirby really kind of presents himself in his sort of the modern Kirby. That's when it appears in 64 in those Captain America stories.
There was a early issue of Fantastic Four, I think it was 33, where they're on the cover with the Submariner and his photo collage around them.
That's actually 1965, and that's issue 33. Yeah, that's...
I love...
Maybe it might be late 64. Again, 64 in the interior stories, you see the collages. But I think that cover technically is dated 60. Either way, that was, I think, the first photo collage, at least on a Marvel cover, probably
ever,
even on a DC cover as well.
Yeah, and I went to some of the early conventions, and that's where I started picking those up. And that one just have to have that issue. I still get the same feeling when I look at some of this stuff. And somebody said to me earlier, it's not just what you see when you look at some of the books and the reprints, but the actual comic books, holding those comic books in your hand and seeing there was almost like a cheapness to the quality that made the artwork pop out even more.
The smell.
Yep.
The smell of newsprint, the smell of comic books. Anybody that knows what I'm talking about just by me saying that knows what I'm talking about.
I could walk into a store when I was a kid and know if they sold comic books before I even saw the comic books.
The feel, the smell. Listen, it made us fall in love with print and the page-turning medium.
Yep.
You know?
That's very cool.
Yes, okay. In my Silver Age book, you see I'm holding it here.
I love that book, by the way. Yeah, there it is.
Thank you. There's Fantastic Four 33, dated December 64, which means it went on sale in late, fall of 64. And that's about the same time. Look, as I turn the page, there's your Chick Stone inked Captain America.
I remember it. Hold it up a little bit. There you go.
Now, that image was the splash page to the very first Kirby Captain America Silver Age 60s story.
Right.
Introducing Captain America. And this is what he says. I quote him. In my book, I put the text of the artist talking about the art in the book. Kirby said, "Movement to me is everything. Motion is life. Captain America is all motion. It's all movement, and it's all life. That's my style. Pure action and reaction." When asked to name his favorite work of his career, Kirby didn't hesitate. He said, "There's no doubt that Captain America became some kind of an institution with some kind of a legendary status. I accept that as probably the big one." So the point is Captain America was his favorite to draw. And he said, "I like figures that moved, figures that fought and twisted. Violence is just a well-timed dance, a ballet. Choreographed, violent ballets." And you see those images?
I remember them well.
And that top image, that's a Chick Stone image from that one of the stories about Captain America fighting the gangs. And that coiled energy exploding on the page. Characters literally leaping off the page. And that's where it comes from.
Yep, absolutely. I think he would have made a great movie director.
Yes. And movie directors were influenced by him. Everybody from George Lucas to Coppola they all read comics. Fellini read comics. Orson Welles. I mean, film and comics. That's a whole podcast we can do.
The Source, The Force, Darkseid, The Dark Side.
Of course, and Orion. But the father-son thing goes back to myths. So Kirby Stuff is modern myths that have been told since time immemorial, but put in a 20th century, guise and costume.
And made them his own.
And made him his own and passed them on to the next generation.
Even doing his pastiches on The Prisoner and Star Trek Piece of the Action and Planet of the Apes and the horror movies, Kirby would just put his own spin on all those in all those.
Yeah, but I'm not a fan of what I call his derivative works.
No.
My feeling is after the Fourth World ended prematurely, which is, again, that's a whole can of worms about why it ended prematurely. But I really don't believe Kirby was ever the same after that. And while he had his moments, I think some of the early Eternals, everybody's got their favorite post-DC Fourth World work.
Yep.
But if you look at what he actually did after 1972, if you look at the last 22 years of his life, because he dies in 1994, there's nothing in that body of work that I think is greater or as great as anything that precedes 1972. Now, that's again, everybody would have their arguments. Some people would say the Eternals is as good. Some people would say, listen, people love Commandy, and they think Commandy is as great as early work. I never liked Commandy. I don't think I ever, actually bought or read an issue. The minute I saw it, I was like, this is Kirby doing Planet of the Apes, and I don't know. It didn't grab me like the New Gods or his Fourth World stuff.
Interesting.
Despite the Vince Coletta inking and then Kirby's dialogue and narration. So, but, you know, if you came into Kirby with the DC stuff, that is your great Kirby work. If you were a little older and came to Kirby with his Marvel work, like my brother did, like I did, I think you tend to think that his Marvel work, despite the flaws in it because of Stan Lee and the inkers, some people say, and I maintain, that is his greatest body of work. I respect the Fourth World stuff, but I think the Fourth World stuff is deeply flawed, the least of which is that he never finished it. It was prematurely decapitated by the powers that be at DC Comics. And I believe they wanted him to fail. I have my own little conspiracy theory that DC felt that Kirby beat them pretty much single-handedly during the 60s. And I think they brought him in to make him fail, to punish him. And they were willing to accept whatever financial loss those books represent. And Carmine Infantino, the editor and the publisher, he maintained till his dying day that those books were canceled because they were losing money. And I asked him when I interviewed him once, I said, how much money were they losing for them to be canceled? You brought in Jack Kirby, the king of comics, the guy that built Marvel Comics during the 60s, that did beat you. You brought him in as the reigning king. And you're telling me within 2 years you canceled his entire magnum opus, the whole thing that he brought to DC? It never made sense to me or a million other Kirby fans when they were prematurely canceled, we felt. And his reason was, Arlen, they were losing an incredible amount of money each month. So I said, Carmine, how much money were they losing? Now, David, I'm going to ask you, in 1970, and the viewers watching this or listening to this, in 1972 dollars, adjusted for inflation, how much do you think 4 books had to lose in money terms for them to cancel all of them, pretty much? Okay, Mr. Miracle lived on, but pretty much they canceled Kirby's Fourth World because of the amount of money they were losing. So I want you just to take a guess.
I have no idea.
But take a guess.
I couldn't venture $1 million. I have no idea.
No, come on, be realistic.
I have no idea what the finances of comics were back in the day.
You're a man who's dealt with real world costs.
Yeah.
Just take you know what an educated guess is, Mr. Educated?
Arlen, you're killing me.
Yeah, I am killing you because I'm asking a simple question. Take a guess.
$10,000.
Okay. I don't know comic book costs either, especially in 1972 dollars.
Yeah.
I was expecting to hear back 4 books. Yeah, like something above $10,000. To me, $10,000, it would have to be at least above $10,000.
That's what I would
cancel the king of comics magnum opus. Okay, are you sitting down?
So far.
Yeah. They were losing $500 a month. Each book. $2,000. This is 1972 dollars. So adjusted for inflation, how much... When he told me they were losing $500 a month each, I had to reel my jaw back off the floor, David. You know what I said to him? I go, Carmine, you got to be kidding me. I go, there were fans who would have paid DC Comics $500 a month to keep those books published, right?
Yeah, I believe there were. I believe you're correct. Did you just freeze? Oh, okay, there you go. You nodded.
Yeah, I'm listening to your feedback. Whatever. Anyway, I forget what we were talking about, but
I think we were talking about Jack Kirby.
Yeah. Thanks for reminding me about that.
Well, let's wrap up since we're hitting about 30 minutes.
Back up. We barely got started.
I got 30 minutes. People won't stay longer than that.
Wait,
we can come back. You'll come back for another show.
I just feel like with Kirby, we barely scratched the tip of the iceberg.
That is exactly the point.
Can you plug my lecture?
Yes, that's where I was going next. Tell me what you're going to be doing about Kirby this year.
So, I try to do my visual lectures to time with 2017 anniversaries. Of course, the Kirby Centennial. So I put together my own, and I recently did it at the San Diego Comic Fest in February. Can you see my Jack Kirby graphic there?
Gorgeous. Yes.
So I submitted it to the prestigious 92nd Street Y in New York City. I've lectured there 2 years ago on Jews in comics, of which Jack Kirby, Yaakov Kurtzberg, was a big part of.
Mm-hmm.
And they accepted my Kirby Centennial lecture for this fall in October.
Awesome.
A day after Columbus Day, which is a day after the New York Comic Con ends.
Great.
So everybody that's visiting New York for the comic convention, if they're going to stay one more day, they can come up to the 92nd Street Y and see me lecture on Kirby.
That's awesome.
And the first thing I said to the woman that accepted my my lecture was, it's great to be able to bring Yaakov Kurtzberg from downtown, uptown, to the 92nd Street Y. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to seeing it myself.
Of course, I may be doing the lecture at other conventions between now and then. Most notably, maybe San Diego Comic-Con. There's going to be a lot of Kirby panels there this year.
I'm sure.
But the other two lectures I submitted were the 50th anniversary of Neil Adams' entry to the comic book field and the 25th anniversary of Batman the Animated Series. So a 25-year anniversary, a 50-year anniversary, and a 100-year anniversary for 2017.
Arlen Schumer, thank you so much for joining us today.
David, it's been my pleasure. I hope I didn't talk your ear off.
That is the whole point. Ouch! Oh.